student religious groups at this campus. And that illuminates some of the issues you've been discussing. One of the things which is interesting is that the University of Iowa ended mandatory chapel attendance in around 1895. And at that point, the university believed that it had officially become an equalitarian institution. And then with some surprise on the public part, we started teaching courses in religion in 1927, I think, when we first opened the school for students. And that was a real surprise because people thought that it was impossible to teach religion at a public institution in the United States. And now, but the interesting thing is that religious discrimination on campus lasted into the 1960s. I recently heard from an old law professor here who said that as late as the early 1960s, the law school was explicitly in hiring decisions asking, is he Protestant? Sometimes, is he the correct kind of Protestant? So what we see is more than half a century of struggle to try to end religious discrimination on campus and be an open, pluralistic campus. And in the light of that half century, it strikes me as natural to be very hesitant to step back and to be very easy to step too far in the wrong direction. But on the other hand, we've had more than half a century now in the School of Religion. We've known how to teach courses on religion on campus for quite a while now. And in fact, those courses have frequently been the most popular courses on campus. You can point to Jay Holstein today, you can point to Moses Young back in the 1930s as having the most popular courses on campus. And these were explicitly courses offered out in the School of Religion. Compared to that, the public schools seem to be in a much worse position because they only discovered that religion was a problem in the 1960s, and sometimes they're still violating current guidelines. And they have a long road to go before they figure out that they can do what we've been doing now since 1927, teaching religion on campus in courses that are indeed very popular. I'm wondering if given how long it takes to make the change to living up to the liberal tradition which we started professing in 1900, given how long it takes to make that change, I think we may be asking too much to expect the Messianic day tomorrow. I see a lot of hope in that history because it says we are reaching someplace good, but we've got a lot of correcting to do, and I think you're right. We've gone too far in the changing from an official position of sectarianism to an official position of secularism without finding a balance.
Right. I mean, that's one of the main themes, that the religious establishment, I think, was a problem. There was religious discrimination. There were quotas about hiring Jews or allowing Jews in as students at universities. There's all sorts of religious discrimination that did present real problems of inequity, and people are still reacting against that. And I also think you're perfectly correct to say that people don't realize how much room there is within the culture to relate religious perspectives to what they're doing. And I'm not talking just about religion courses. In fact, the gist of what I've been saying has been to say, why don't people more often in other sorts of disciplines think about what's the implication of my religious views for thinking about literary theory, or thinking about how you should do history or anthropology or things like that. And there's no reason in the world why those can't be done as legitimate kinds of intellectual enterprises within the current rules of church and state and so forth.
I really respect the thought of being able to being able to communicate as within your own paradigm or within your own understanding, religious understanding. I guess the question that comes to my mind is that what often happens in the discourse is the fact that you end up having some people that desire to play the game right and some people that don't desire to play the game right. How do you then propose putting yourself in that shoe where you're wanting to have this discourse, you know what the rules are, you're trying to play by the rules, but the fact is the individual you're discoursing with chooses not to follow those rules. How do you respond to that, to this issue of culture and trying to interact with culture?
Well, that we're always running into that problem in the university, that people will be subverting the rules, or I listened to a paper night before last that was from the point of view of post-colonial theory, and part of the whole point of the paper was to make the language so obscure that no one could understand exactly what it meant. Well, maybe I'm an optimist, but I guess I think those kinds of things will go away after the point is made. But at least you can say this about, it's the religious points of view you're dealing with, again, they're parallel to non-religious points of view with respect to those kinds of problems. And somehow the university lives with those kinds of things, or gets rid of them eventually, or people stop paying attention, or maybe they succeed in certain cases. But religion doesn't introduce anything that in principle is different. Now, I do realize in practice the nature of religious commitment sometimes is such that it invites some things that are going to be problematic, but nonetheless, the point of a university is to explore all viable positions that you possibly can, and I don't think it makes sense to lop off a whole set of them as a class simply because that class contains some that are problematic.
Where you talk about the discourse in the language, and its effects on people, whether religious or not. One of the things that you talked about, in reference to equality, promoting diversity. One of the things that I did not hear was the Eastern religion mentioned. There was that excluded from your read. Hinduism, Buddhism, and those. And also when the mention of fundamentals came up, the Louis Farrakhan, a black man, was the only person named. The language, whether it's religious or it's secular, must be equal for all people. I think that that if we're going to promote the good of religion, that we have to promote all religions for all people across the globe.
I think that's very important, and I didn't mention all the religions that might be mentioned, or even have any intention of suggesting that I was trying to do that. And I think it's important to treat them all equally, and I think it's I think with respect to African Americans, I think that there has been very little effort made in the universities to take their religious traditions seriously. That they've been welcomed into universities but essentially been told, leave that part of your culture behind, and that's something that ought to be thought about. Is that the right way to bring in other cultures? But I certainly agree with you entirely. You know, there ought to be representatives of Hindu positions or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of religions, and there's always a danger. I mean, that's another problem with the proposal I'm making. There's always a danger of leaving somebody out, and there does have to be some consideration of what the constituency is for a particular point of view, because obviously you can't have every point of view represented. But in principle, I think I agree with that point.
I have one question. I feel that you are working with the notion of religion in a somewhat limited way, as if religion were something where people have catechisms or go to church, synagogue, or something like that. And the problem is not so much that such religion is excluded, but as I see it, we have an established religion, which nobody wants to call a religion, but it functions as a religion, and that is a kind of social Darwinism. And this social Darwinism is generally accepted. It is the official position of many Republicans and many Democrats, and it is essentially a religious conviction, which is taught. I think Mr. Gingrich has a course that he's teaching all on the radio or somewhere. This is something that's part of our pattern today. And it seems to me a little unfair that this one kind of religion gets all that state support and is established, and you people are the same. I mean, if you're going to criticize this situation, you would say, hey, let's be fair. Let's bell the cat and say we have a religious establishment in America that is basically that the rich are the good, the poor are the bad, and some of this is totally against some of the classical religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And some of the problems that we have with these religions is that if you take them seriously, you can't take English seriously.
I agree with that. That's, I think, a perfectly legitimate way to argue the same point that I want to argue. I've been using religion in the more narrow sense of organized, more traditional kinds of religions that come with organizations and so forth. But it certainly makes sense, and it has a distinguished there's a distinguished history to regarding what are functionally religious kinds of positions as, I mean, you can say, what's a functional religion for this group, or religions that are in effect the highest commitments that people have, and there's a number of them that are around that have that kind of quasi, that kind of religious function.
One more question. Before we do it, though, I want to remind you that you've been pursuing these issues. We will be returning to Wesley House 120 North. You just right over there, right? Okay. And we can continue our discussion at that time. And one last question.
I was wondering, I heard kind of earlier about that the plethora of religions that are out there kind of make one believe that there has to be some sort of relativity and that all religions should be treated the same. But I think the inevitable question will come up, who's right? Or when things contradict each other, which road should we take? So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's a lot of people believe that there's an absolute truth, and I guess we try to find relative truths that will work for us. And what I'm trying to say is, I think that will become a part of things, and I was just wondering how you would respond to that.
Oh, now what's the question exactly?
The question is, when religions contradict each other, and we're teaching these religions as a sense of morality or as a way of looking at life, how do you deal with that discrepancy, and what would your solution to that be?
Well, my proposal is that people who are representative of various religious traditions would be speaking from the point of view of those traditions, and that would be part of the give and take of a university, and so that along with other contenders, I mean, there's all sorts of things that are believed in the university that are, one group believes one thing, one group believes another. So I'm not advocating that there be sort of teaching about religion so much, or you're trying to deal with all religions and who's right, but rather that there be various religiously informed perspectives would be regarded as equally legitimate to various perspectives that are informed by other sorts of commitments that people bring with them to the academy, and then there would be whatever give and take there ought to be in the academy.